everyday witches emerge from the shadows of secrecy. Broom closets are flinging open and witches are taking flight. Whether you are hiding in your cozy closet or flying with pride, stay for a spell as Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon and her guests share magical moments, stir the cauldron, and debunk misinformation and misconceptions about paganism, witches, and our wonderful world of magic.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by a special guest who has been a religious advocate for many decades. She is Selena Fox, the founder of Circle Sanctuary. Welcome, Selena.
Great to be here.
I know you have many things to talk about, but some people may not know you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about Circle Sanctuary and how you started it?
Circle Sanctuary is a global nature spirituality church that's serving Wiccans, witches, druids, heathens, pagans, and other people involved in contemporary nature religions, not only across the USA, but around the world. We do education, do networking online. We have a podcasting network. We do monthly full moon circles on YouTube that are open to whoever wants to join. We have an active military ministries as part of our work. And we're very involved in the quest for equal rights for pagans of many paths through Our Lady Liberty League, which emerged back in 1985. Circle Sanctuary began in 1974, and we're headquartered at Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve that's located just west of Madison, Wisconsin, USA. We gather people in person and online for a variety of seasonal celebrations, Sabbaths, as well as ceremonies connecting with the moon and life passage ceremonies. And it's great to be here. We have a podcasting network called CSNP, standing for Circle Sanctuary Network Podcast. And we've been doing pagan networking since the 1970s, shortly after we began in 1974.
Wow, that's a lot. So where do we begin? But the reason for today's episode is we are in April of 2023. April 23rd, 2007 is known for the Pentacle Quest success, and you were a big part of it.
Yes.
There are so many people who don't know about this quest. Can you tell us about it and your part in it?
Yes, there are many people that came together to achieve this major religious freedom victory that not only has benefited Wiccans and other pagans who have served or who are serving in the US military, but it has had a profound effect in terms of building bridges of understanding, not only in the USA, but in other parts of the world, about contemporary paganism and the need for us to have equal rights. So the Pentacle Quest was the quest to get the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to add the pentacle, the encircled five-pointed star, to the list of emblems of belief that can be included in grave markers issued by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to mark the graves and for remembrance of those who have served in the U.S. military. The Pentacle Quest began in 1997. The Military Pagan Network did some research to find out what was needed to get a symbol added to the list and began the quest. In the years that followed, some other organizations also made contact with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and requested the Pentacle get added to the list. Circle Sanctuary has had a long-standing relationship with a variety of pagan organizations, including the Military Pagan Network, and had been supporting this quest since 1997. After several different pagan organizations tried to get the Pentacle added to the VA's list of emblems of belief so that it could get on the grave markers that the VA issued, there had not been any progress on this. Some people did not get any response to their inquiries. Other people got responses indicating that they were changing the regulations regarding adding symbols, and then no more follow-up. We decided to go from a support role in 2005 to the front lines of the Pentacle Quest. Increasing numbers of our community members were being deployed to Afghanistan for Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom. Plus, we have community members who had served in the U.S. military who were getting up in years and wanted to have the Pentacle on their VA-issued grave marker. So we decided to put in our own application. Having worked for the U.S. government in a variety of capacities, beginning in my youth, doing summer job for the U.S. Forest Service, Department of Agriculture, and I even worked at the Pentagon for the Office of Chief of Staff of the Army, I knew it was important to document our quest in our request to get the Pentacle added to the list. So when we sent our application in, we made sure it was return receipt requested and it had to be signed for. And yes, we did get a response, which was, well, we're changing the rules for how you apply. Well, fortunately, later that year, we did get a follow-up email from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and they let us know the additional things that were needed to get a symbol added to the list. And one of those things was that there had to be an immediate need. That meant somebody who had died and their next of kin was going to be requesting this for their loved one. One of our community members, Jerome Birnbaum, who had served in the U.S. military, passed on shortly after we had gotten that notice. And after consulting with his partner, she decided that, yes, she would like the Pentacle on his gravestone. So we were able to submit a packet of information and fulfill all the things that were needed. So we submitted that, and in January of 2006, we learned that they had received our application. I thought, well, this is good. It's moving forward. However, we had not gotten any acceptance. We gave the VA everything they needed, but they still weren't granting our request. And I had sent it to the VA in several different forms, and we knew they had it. Well, a few weeks after sending in the packet, Roberta Stewart, whose husband, Sergeant Patrick Stewart, was killed in action in Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, made the decision to get a marker to honor her husband's memory and sacrifice at the Veteran Cemetery in Fernley, Nevada. They were both from Nevada. And she went in to get the memorial plaque to go on the Wall of Heroes and wanted a pinnacle on it, and found out in connecting with the people at the cemetery that the symbol wasn't on the list. So she would have to get a marker without the symbol. She was furious. Her husband had been killed in action in September, and this was February. And she really was at a point of really wanting to mark his memory and to have his marker go up next to his best friend, who was also killed when the Chinook helicopter was shot from the sky and by enemy fire. She learned through networking connections that Circle Sanctuary had applied and was working on this. And she and I talked together. She was part of a large network of people that we call Circle Network that are associated with us, but are connected with a variety of different faith traditions and places. And when she learned that we had already applied and had gotten information in, I said, well, Roberta, are you open to sharing your story with others if need be? And she said, yes. And I said, well, we may have to take your story public. Are you open to that? And she said, yes. I said, okay, we're going to get this done. So after getting permission from Roberta and adding her request to get the pinnacle for Sergeant Patrick Stewart added to our packet of information, it became apparent to me I had to go to Washington, D.C. and talk directly with the VA officials involved with deciding on symbols. I managed to get a face-to-face meeting with the head of Memorial Affairs for the National Cemetery Administration, a deputy undersecretary.
Was that difficult?
Well, I actually got the appointment and then thought it was really important that they knew, first of all, that I was with Circle Sanctuary and that it was about the Pentacle Quest. So I got the appointment. Reverend Fox was written in the book, and then I sent a letter detailing our situation and what I wanted to talk about. Well, they had already made the appointment and decided to see me. So my husband accompanied me, and we went to Washington, D.C., to the VA offices, a very wonderful suite of offices overlooking the White House in Lafayette Park, right in the heart of D.C., and went in and got to meet directly with the Deputy Undersecretary for Memorial Affairs. And he had other people with him. And I'm sitting there and making our request. And he was very respectful. He listened. But I got the distinct sense that we weren't going to accomplish it during that meeting. I had some things with me that I hoped would encourage them to say yes at that time in March of 2006. And the undersecretary said, well, we may need to revise the symbols process again. At which point I produced some paperwork that I had gotten from a veteran who showed me that a Sikh or Sikh, S-I-K-H, sergeant killed in action in Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan not only got the Sikh symbol added to the list, but the marker produced within a few weeks. And I pulled that paperwork out and showed it to the Undersecretary for Memorial Affairs, at which point he thanked me for my input and ended the meeting saying he had to go to Capitol Hill to talk about the VA budget and left. And so meeting ended. By the time my husband and I went downstairs and got our various items because it's a secure location, that we had to leave some things there at the main desk. And then we got our lunch and our other things and went out to Lafayette Park. And I'm sitting down there and we're beginning to eat our lunch. Well, I got a call from the veteran who had gotten me the paperwork. It was legally obtained. He actually worked for the VA. It was an internal document. And he said, well, you must have talked with the Undersecretary for Memorial Affairs because my boss just called me into the office about this. We're all supportive of this. Everything is fine, but they checked on this, and my boss backed me up and said, yes, this is came from our office. And then shortly after that, I got a call from a radio station in another part of Wisconsin who was aware of the Pentacle Quest and interviewed me. So I was able to go on record with the radio station and talk about the quest and how important it was to have equal rights for people of all faiths and those who might not have a religion but have a belief system, to have those symbols available to be put on memorial markers. So some really good things came from that, but we didn't get the quest done at that point. Time moved on, and Memorial Day was coming up. Sergeant Patrick Stewart and his crewmates were all killed in September 25th, 2005. So this was getting ready for Memorial Day 2006, and that was the Memorial Day that would be honoring their service and sacrifice. And his widow was very concerned that the Pinnacle had not yet been added to the list, even though I had provided everything that the VA requested after changing the regulations about what was needed. I provided everything. I detailed it. It was several dozen pieces of paper going through every item and how we qualified and how we met this. She felt she needed to have a Memorial Day honoring of her husband's sacrifice and was to speak at the Veteran Cemetery for that Memorial Day. Word about the Pentacle Quest was starting to go into some media, and she was supposed to be speaking at the main Veterans Day event at the Fernley Cemetery, but got uninvited. That really concerned her and concerned the chaplain who was going to be speaking there. He decided not to be at that ceremony, and Roberta and I, with the help of the chaplain and some other people, organized a Freedom for All Faiths Memorial Day ceremony, had people from Sergeant Patrick Stewart's Mustang 22 show up. We made sure that all the regulations regarding who can be in uniform and not uniform, and this was a memorial service, but it was also a calling for upholding freedom of religion. And there were people from both political parties that were there. It was a multi-partisan event. It wasn't a political event, but it was an event not only to honor Sergeant Patrick Stewart, but to really call for equal rights for all people who have served and who are serving. It got a lot of national attention and international attention. It was held in a park across from the Veterans Cemetery, and as part of our ceremony, we had a big flower wreath with a pinnacle in the middle of it, and that wreath was going to be put at the Wall of Heroes to honor Sergeant Patrick Stewart on Memorial Day. So media showed up at our event and then showed up as we processed over to the Veterans Cemetery and went to the place on the wall where Sergeant Patrick Stewart's plaque with Pinnacle eventually would be, but it was blank at that point. Associated Press, United Press International, a whole variety of wire services, local press, state press, military press, all were there. And as a result, we got a lot of headlines and some court of public opinion pressure to get this done for somebody who had given his life in service for freedom, in service to our country. So, as a result of that, we knew that we needed to continue on with this quest, and other people started joining the quest, leaders and practitioners of a number of different pagan traditions, but also people from different religious institutions, different faith traditions, people who are doing military support work. And in terms of the media coverage we got, it was supportive and accurate, and it was the whole spectrum of media. And people began asking the question, why isn't this getting done? So we were really hoping that with this additional attention and additional people being involved, including elected officials who spoke at the memorial service we put on, that this would help and we would achieve success. But it's now June and it's still not done. Some people we knew talked with me and Roberta about having a rally in Washington, D.C. in the park in front of the VA building and the White House. And so there was a pagan freedom rally on July 4th of 2006. So Roberta spoke there and I spoke there, and the executive director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, also spoke there, an attorney as well as a Christian minister, Reverend Barry Lynn. And we had a great outpouring of support from not only all the pagans that showed up, but people of other backgrounds that came to this pagan rights rally. And I do think that was an important piece to the quest. And of course, there was media coverage of this. The next day, we were able to meet with Americans United for Separation of Church and State and talk about them representing us in this quest. We knew it was likely necessary to lawyer up, to get legal representation, as well as have people help us with other forms of networking and communication in the society as a whole. And in addition to meeting with Americans United for Separation of Church and State staff, Roberta and I also ended up doing some media coverage that had resulted from us speaking at the rally. So we were on Anderson Cooper, standing in view of Arlington National Cemetery. We were in a whole variety of television shows, not only the day after this rally, but in the weeks and months that followed. So the good news is the support for the quest was continuing to build. That was good. But had the VA added the symbol to the list yet? No. We tried a variety of different things to try to make this happen. And I am happy to report that on April 23rd, 2007, the symbol finally went on the list. And I want to take this time to give thanks not only to Roberta for bringing her story forward, and to the widow of Jerome Birnbaum, who made the decision to have the Pentacle request go in so that we could apply under those new regulations back in 2005. And to every other person that was part of the Pentacle Quest. A special thanks to Americans United for Separation of Church and State, to our lead attorney, Richard Katsky, to the head of AU at the time, Barry Lynn, and to the whole team of people. And also appreciation to the American Civil Liberties Union and to a number of other organizations that had parts to this quest. We had supporting letters from Covenant of the Goddess and Sacred Well Congregation. We had the support of the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. We had the support of the Carillion tradition. So in addition to all those I've named, I want to give thanks to everyone who helped, because it truly was a collaborative effort on the part of not only a wide variety of organizations and individuals, but institutions. And I am so thankful we had that support, not only in the legal pieces, but the public relation pieces, the networking pieces. On the day that the Pentacle went on the list, a press conference was held at the National Press Club. Barry Lynn, Richard Katsky, Roberta, and myself all spoke at the National Press Club at our press conference. The room was packed with journalists, not only from the Washington, D.C. area, but from around the world. Associated Press had been tracking the story for quite some time and were the first to break the news. And we know that by the end of the press conference, pagans in Iraq and Afghanistan had heard. It was that fast. And it was before social media really was a widespread thing for people. We were still dealing with a lot of in-print newspapers, and before podcasts were really that available. And we got word that people who were serving in the U.S. military in war zones outed themselves when the news came out. And that really was such a positive, wonderful thing. And of course, in the U.S., Circle Sanctuary has sponsored pagan military circles at U.S. military installations in the U.S. and around the world, and on ships and at training facilities for many years. And of course, the word went out there. And I can say that it was a very happy day that the Pentacle went on the list and we were able to get this done. Yes, we did have to actually file a lawsuit to get this to happen. We actually filed a lawsuit in a DC court as well as a federal court in Wisconsin, and it was a decision on the judge of the Wisconsin court that made the quest proceed without delay. And now there are more than 200 markers in public and private cemeteries across the U.S. with grave markers with pentacles on them.
What an uphill battle.
10 years and a lot of paperwork and a lot of communications. I actually was in Washington multiple times in an attempt to get this done. But the good news is that with this collaborative effort, it happened. And the VA did do some more updating of their rules that now make it much easier for people of different spiritual paths and religions and philosophies to have symbols requested and considered and added to the list. After the Pentacle went on the list, other symbols started getting added more frequently. I remember at the press conference on April 23rd, 2007, we had distributed the text of our lawsuit and the attached documents and the agreement and a variety of other things. And one of the stipulations in our settlement agreement was that I retain the right to work for other symbols getting on the list. And during the press conference, one of the journalists said, "Why have you requested other symbols to be on the list?" And I said, Circle Sanctuary serves pagans of many different paths and traditions as part of our universalist approach with our church. And I know that Druids want the Awen to be added to the list. And someday we plan to work to get that and some other symbols on the list. Well, several years after the Pentacle Quest met with success, we did have the opportunity to work with a family to get the Awen proposed under the new regulations. I'm happy to report it did not require a complicated and intensive battle for that to happen. It took some time, the bureaucratic processing time, but there are now also grave markers with Awen images on them. And at Circle Cemetery, which is the Green Cemetery and a national pagan cemetery that's at Circle Sanctuary headquarters, we not only have VA issued markers with pinnacles on it, but we have a marker with an Awen on it.
I understand that Thor's hammer has it been approved or is it still?
Yes, the first pagan, or some people prefer the heathen term in talking about Asatru in Northern Way. A different family requested that and were able to get the Thor's hammer added to the list. So now we have the Pentacle, the Thor's hammer, and the Awen as options. And there's some other symbols now on the list that perhaps some people may find workable for their own spiritual pathways that aren't linked to a particular tradition or form of paganism. And I'm so thankful that it's become easier for people to be able to get their religious symbol considered and added to the list.
And we have that right. We should be able to have anything we want on our grave marker.
Yes, and I understand that having worked in various capacities since my youth with the federal government, that systems need to be put in place and policies and procedures. And it pretty much came out why we were able to win the quest is that we filed a federal lawsuit on Maundy Thursday in 2007. For those who know their Christian lore and teachings, Maundy Thursdays, the time of the Last Supper. So it was actually Good Friday when we settled with the VA. It was late night on that Thursday, Maundy Thursday, that we went ahead and were moving ahead with our lawsuit, and the VA decided we're going to settle. So how I spent my Good Friday of 2007 was with our attorneys and with attorneys with the VA and coming up with the terms for the agreement. We did not ask for financial compensation for any of the families that were part of our lawsuit or for Circle Sanctuary, but we thought it was important to have our attorney's fees covered, the legal compensation. Americans United for Separation of Church and State was able to get some money as part of the settlement to help them with their good work of really upholding religious freedom for all and separation of church and state. How did they decide to settle with us? There were 6 documents that were discovered that clearly pointed to discrimination against the Wiccan religion and paganism by elected government officials, including those high-placed. What the VA wanted as part of the settlement was the return of those 6 documents. But I wouldn't sign off on it until I retain my freedom of speech to talk about those documents. So we pretty much were able to sort that out. We did. Americans United for Separation of Church and State, as part of representing us legally, requested that the VA turn over all the documents that had to do with the Pentacle Quest. Whoever had asked for it, what correspondence, and essentially we not only got those, but a whole lot of other documents that were somewhat connected with this. In Washington, D.C., sometimes it's called a blizzard of paperwork. Now that things are more electronic, I don't know what the equivalent is, but essentially thousands of copies of government documents were sent to Americans United for Separation of Church and State. There were just boxes and boxes. When we had Victory Day, I went to the AU offices after the press conference and did a podcast because Barry Lynn also had a podcast at that time. And I was able to see the boxes firsthand, not only the actual documents that I had seen, but the boxes of all these documents. And to their credit, AU went through every single document and sorted through all of those documents and found the incriminating evidence that proved our case. So they were included in our lawsuit, and it was really clear that any attempts to try to bury it in a blizzard of paper didn't work. And I am so thankful that we were able to sort it out and really get the Pinnacle added to the list.
Can you tell us what discriminatory comments or statements were in these documents?
Well, yes, there was some comments from the president at the time that witchcraft was not a religion, and it was in connection with something different, but essentially a remark made on Good Morning America by the president who was running for president at the time was one of the reasons that the VA did not move ahead with the Pentacle. But there was a lot of misunderstanding about what pagan and nature religion was about, what Wicca was about. And rather than trying to point fingers of blame, I will say that coming out of all of this, I think there was a much better understanding about the need to accommodate nature religions rather than focusing on Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and religions rooted in Asia. And I mean, even the humanists have had a symbol on the list. So it was really important that pagan symbols also could be put on the list because the number of people who are pagans serving in the U.S. military has continued to grow and expand. So we were able to do some public education as part of the quest. And in fact, on July 4th of 2007, there was another rally for pagan rights that was held. That was in part a celebration of the Pentacle Quest Victory. And also on July 4th of 2007 was the dedication of the very first memorial marker in Arlington National Cemetery that had a pinnacle and a Christian cross on it. In fact, it was the first interfaith marker that included a pinnacle. And I helped facilitate that dedication. And Barry Lynn, who was head of AU at the time, was there in his capacity, not only working with AU, but because he was a Christian minister, I thought it was really fitting to have a Christian minister and a pagan priestess dedicate this stone that had a Christian cross on it and on one side and a pinnacle on the other side. When you get a memorial marker after having served in U.S. armed services or one's killed in action, essentially in Arlington National Cemetery, you can have your spouse buried there as well and have a marker. So we had the Christian cross and the pinnacle on the two sides of the stone. And through some special arrangements, because there were people that wanted to be at that event, we were able to, but couldn't physically attend. I was able to work with the Arlington Cemetery staff and other people involved in decision making, because it was July 4th. There's some special regs around it, to be able to film this dedication, to have the dedication on July 4th of the stone, and to have it videoed not only by people who were doing it for personal use, but the BBC was there, and we were able to bring some reporters with us that covered that dedication. Memorial Day of 2007 at Circle Sanctuary's cemetery, we did a dedication of 3 of those markers, and including Sergeant Patrick Stewart's marker. I am so thankful for the people that were able to be present there. And we actually did a press conference because Roberta was present, as well as the widow of Jerome Birnbaum and the widow of another veteran, Doug Wilkie, who has his pinnacle marker. He was from Kentucky, up at our cemetery. And so we did a dedication. We also met with the press. So the Memorial Day 2007, in 1 year's time after that Memorial Day in 2006, we were finally able to honor not only Sergeant Patrick Stewart by dedicating his marker, but 2 other veterans. And since that time, we've had other memorial markers up at our cemetery, including markers for 2 veterans who were very active in the Pentacle Quest, Eric Erickson, and he actually created an image of a pinnacle version of the fallen circle, image that you'll find in a lot of military sites doing remembrances. Dennis Presser, a longtime member of the Circle Sanctuary community and also a veteran, and had served in the National Guard as well as being in with the Army. And in fact, the day that the Pentacle Quest news of success broke, he decided to be out as a pagan with local news, because I was in DC at the time, and he went on the local news and talked about being a veteran and what was important to have that symbol. And another veteran who was part of the Pentacle Quest, who actually helped helped me lead the ceremony of Quest celebration at Pagan Spirit Gathering that year, Bud Young, who recently died. He will be getting his pinnacle marker in coming months, and we are going to honor his memory. So, the quest happened in 2007 in terms of the success, but markers are continuing to happen. And some of those who worked on that quest have died or are in the last part of their lives. And I think it's really important to remember these stories of collaboration and perseverance that have brought about results. So we call April 23rd Veteran Pentacle Quest Victory Day, and we do a celebration every year, not only at our cemetery, but online. And this year, I am glad to be able to speak about the quest as part of this podcast.
This is so wonderful to hear this whole story on this podcast. And the reason I wanted you on here is because you have made this happen along with all those other people, but so many people don't know about the Pentacle Quest success, the victory story, and more people need to know. And we do need to celebrate every April 23rd.
Well, yes, and I have recently heard from some other leaders that it would be really helpful to do some additional publicity about the Pentacle Quest success. So thank you for being part of that process. What I think are the takeaways of this include the importance of pagans of different paths and organizations working together collaboratively for pagan rights, and also being in good relation with people of other beliefs, other religions, other churches, other religious institutions, as well as free thinkers, atheists, agnostics, secular humanists, people that may not call themselves religious or spiritual, that it's really important to build partnerships. I also think this story is a reminder of what can happen when people across political differences can come together and find common ground, because we had Democrats and Republicans joining together, and a wide range of media services, everything from what some people would call liberal or conservative, as well as people more middle of the road. And while I realize times have changed and there's many things that can emerge that can cause division and differences, the Pentacle Quest also is a story of hope and collaboration and the importance of finding common ground. And very important takeaway from the Pentacle Quest has to do with the roots of America. And I say this because I feel passionately about the importance of religious freedom, the right of everyone to be able to practice their own beliefs, to be, as long as it's not harming others. And unfortunately, there have been some people trying to use the name religious freedom as an excuse to be a bigot, to take away rights from other people. That's not what our founders were about. And I am very passionate about religious freedom and separation of church and state and standing up for the Constitution. I know a number of people are. I have hopes that as we move forward as a nation, that we can find good ways to listen to each other, to share our perspectives, and to have respectful debate and discussion, and ideally collaboration, to really work for the greater good for all, not only humans here in this country, but around the world and off planet. Yes, we've got some humans in the International Space Station, and the Artemis mission is going to take more people up to the moon, but to also be in good relation with plants and animals and ecosystems. So I continue to be hopeful that divisions can be bridged and that we can work together. And the Pentacle Quest is an example of how people from a wide range of backgrounds and political orientations and cultural affinities can join together and get things in a good way. So I'm so thankful for this opportunity to share this story. And I want to give thanks to all of those who are presently serving in the U.S. military, in the USA, and around the world, and to those who have served, all our veterans, and to military families. You all are doing important work, and it's important to express appreciation and to celebrate those who put their lives and their energies on the line for the greater good. And I know that you're part of a military family, so thank you for all of your work and for this podcast.
Thank you. And thank you. It's been wonderful having you here and hearing your story firsthand. And we're going to get the word out, and more people are going to know who pagans are and who they are not.
Yes, and I knew that there have been some stories that have happened since the Pentacle Quest. And I remember seeing an article on the front page of the Washington Post with an image taken at Arlington National Cemetery. And amongst all the grave markers, and there were certainly a lot of crosses there, there was a pentacle. It was section 60 in Arlington National Cemetery. And to actually see that on the front page of a major newspaper, and to see that our symbol was there along with all the other symbols. Indeed, part of what the Pentacle Quest was literally getting carved into stone, a pagan religious symbol that dates back to ancient pagan days. Pythagoras, people know about him for the 3-4-5 triangle as part of studying math and geometry. Less is known that the pentacle was something associated with his pagan mystery traditions. And it's something very old, but yet it's something continuing to be used today. And I celebrate pagans of the past as well as pagans of the present and those yet to come. And we find good ways to honor and learn about our history and to lay the groundwork for equality, liberty, and justice for all, not only in this country, but around the world and beyond. So be it.
So be it.
Those who are interested in learning more about Circle Sanctuary and the various things that we do for pagan rights through the Lady Liberty League and for pagans serving in the U.S. military, those who want to learn about our environmental activism work, we have podcasts, we have material online. You can go to circlesanctuary.org. You can follow us in social media. And every year for Pentacle Quest Victory Day, I put up at least one post about this celebration. And this year, I'm actually going to be in Washington, D.C., and speaking at a religious freedom summit that's being hosted and organized by Americans United for Separation of Church and State. So yes, I'm in my 70s now. I'm in my crone mode, but I'm continuing the quest to have that equality, liberty, and justice for all. And you can learn more about what we're doing. And we celebrate our pagan warriors, not only those who have served and are serving in the U.S. military and their families, but people who are in law enforcement, firefighting, first responders through our warrior ritual. And We have that as part of our Pagan Spirit Gathering every year. And we continue to celebrate the many facets of paganism. So hopefully we'll get a chance to connect again in cyberspace and perhaps face to face. And of course, inner space, where we recognize our interconnection with each other, not only those alive here and now, but those who've gone before and those who are yet to come. Thank you so much for having me be part of the podcast.
Thank you for joining us for Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. Have a burning question or have a topic you'd love Theodora and her guests to discuss on the show? Contact her through Instagram at Theodora Pendragon. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And help us spread the word by leaving us a rating and review and sharing it with your friends. See you next time, and may your magic always shine.